And we love morning, everyone. Kenneth here, and I've got a special guest with me here today, Bronwyn, who's been working with us for, oh gosh, I don't know, many years. Bronwyn, lost count somewhere, maybe two, I don't know, 2.5, I don't know, maybe one, I don't know. Can't be long, can't be shorter than 6 months. But I've got Bronwyn here with me this
No,
morning, and how long was it,
morning.
Bronwyn? How long have we been working together?
I've probably been part of Grace Online for over 2 years now.
Okay, over 2 years. Awesome. So just for all our viewers, I've
Nice.
got Bronwyn here with us. She's been working with us for just over 2 years. Bronwyn is in charge of the ladies sexual addiction program that we've got running. She's a phenomenal person. She's also leading some groups and stuff with us. And she also works with teenagers, young girls who's got sexual addiction issues. So, Bronwyn, would you like to share a little bit more about yourself? Whatever it is that you feel comfortable. I know we've done a live stream before, but yeah, whatever you feel comfortable sharing about yourself, and maybe talk a little bit about the group that happened this morning, and then we'll jump into talking a bit more about the ladies program and the teenage program, if that's okay with you.
Okay, that's quite a lot of information. So I'll just start with who I am. So my name is Bronwyn. I'm 39 years old, married to a wonderful man. We've been married for 15 years this year. We have 4 children. And my profession is actually a school teacher, which kind of happened by accident. I started, excuse me, I started my studies as a social worker and I went in kind of the route of psychology, but ended up as a school teacher. And I actually say that being a school teacher a lot of the times is like being a social worker. It is like being a psychologist. You deal with people all day long. And obviously, you dealing with quite vulnerable people. Being a teenager is a hard time of life. We forget how emotionally difficult it is. And obviously, even though it wasn't that long ago that I was a teen, certainly the challenges that teenagers face now, considering the internet and that they all have devices in their hands 24/7, they are living in a very different world with very different challenges to what we were. So, yeah, I'm a school teacher by profession, but I've been involved in Grace Online now for about 2 years. I started in the organization because of my partner's own sexual addiction, and he was getting help for his addiction. I was getting help for my trauma recovery in my own relationship, and then yeah, through the years have become a facilitator. Like Kenneth said, particularly dealing with women who come into the program who, like myself, were dealing with living with a partner who has a sexual addiction, and then women reaching out for help for themselves, help to overcome the trauma of it, dealing with some of the questions, and just in general dealing with the loneliness that this kind of addiction creates within a marriage. And yeah, just the things that are so difficult to talk about with somebody who just doesn't get what all of this means. So I'll talk about the women's meeting that we had in a moment. Um, but yeah, sorry, Ken, I think you said we'll get to the teenage sexual addiction later. So let me deal with what we did this morning. So we just came off a 1 hour session, which was a woman who's part of our Women of Worth community. And she's also been part of us for about 18 months or so. And she shared this morning what's called her step one presentation. And she shared about really a journey that she's been on with a group that is facilitated by an amazing leader that we have on our team. Her name is Beverly. And Bev is amazing with regards to trauma recovery, but her speciality is working in the area of codependency. So the ladies have a group that meets once a week and they're working through a book that's called Codependent No More. And this book, particularly the version that we work with, is written for women who, or not only women, but partners of people who have a sexual addiction and have lived through that kind of relationship. And it really helps the ladies to take control of what seems like just an insignificant insurmountable circumstance, you know, to live with a partner who has a sexual addiction can be so he promotes ladies how to empower them. Setting boundaries also empowers ladies with regards to how to overcome their trauma, not only the trauma from their relationship, but trauma from just their general experiences, starting from childhood. So it takes them all the way back and works all the way up to the present day. And this amazing lady, Priscilla, shared some of her story, just trying to unpack some of what she's been through, what it taught her about relationships, what it taught her about people, what it taught her about trust, and how she's been able to work through some of the pain that she's experienced and become somebody who is not just dependent on her partner or dependent on somebody else for her sense of worth. And so it was really a morning of celebrating how far this lady has come in her relationship with herself, in her relationship with God, and in her relationship with others. So I hope that answers the question, Ken.
Yeah,
But yeah, it really was an amazing, a very emotional morning as we celebrated with her. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks. Sorry for loading you with so many questions all at once. Tell me your whole life story in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
No, I have a tendency to do that. One of the things that stood out for me the most in the session this morning was from pain to purpose, that transformation from utter hopelessness and desperation, being lost in drowning in pain, the pain of betrayal and betrayal trauma, to a space of having purpose and being able to share my story in a way that would resonate with others, but not just resonating with others, but also inspire other women to also rise up and become the best versions of themselves. So that was something that was very amazing. And I think Priscilla said something along the lines of this whole codependency. It's a weird, terrible name because I think it frightens people off. But she said in the beginning, she thought this was about being a victim or something like that. But she discovered that this was not about being a victim or being labeled as somebody that's been hurt or damaged or broken in some way. But this whole process is about taking responsibility in a space of being accountable, responsibility and accountability, and empowering yourself to become the best version of yourself. And we saw that literally happening in front of our eyes this morning. I mean, there was like 25, 26 people on the line this morning, and like everyone, I think, was massively impacted. Is there anything that you'd like to say about that? The pain, purpose, victim, abused position?
Yeah, I think Ken, something that's super important. What's super important to mention is that obviously for this lady to get to the place where she was, or today, to be able to give that presentation, obviously what we don't see is all of the blood, sweat, and tears that she's gone through in order to actually be able to speak about the things that she's experienced. So, that's why I call it a morning of celebration, because we saw this lady coming into our program, and the brokenness and the misconceptions and the lies and the pain and the confusion and just the conflict that she was experiencing. We saw her coming in, that lady, and we're seeing 18 months down the line, the growth that's happened. But obviously 18 months is a very long time. And what is worth mentioning is how deliberate and how committed she has been in the process of unpacking all of her trauma. So, we do believe, and I personally believe in turning your pain into purpose. And that came up this morning, like you said, taking your own trauma and making it purposeful. And what we mean by that is being able to speak honestly about it, feel what you felt, talk about what you've been through, but in that, being able to inspire people and encourage people that there is hope for breakthrough. There is hope for change. There is hope for growth. And so obviously with this lady, Priscilla, this morning, that's exactly what she was. In order to get to that place of breakthrough, you have to walk through the really painful stuff. So if you think metaphorically about breaking down a wall, you got to ram at that wall repeatedly to break it down. And that's a painful process that really requires you to be very deliberate in your efforts. And Priscilla certainly spoke about that this morning, about being deliberate in lifting the lid off the little boxes, the little emotional boxes that she created in order to survive the traumas that she was experiencing, and lifting the lid off of those boxes and starting to look inside deliberately at those things that terrify you and those things that overwhelm you is the part, obviously, that we don't see her going through. And that's certainly incredibly painful. But our community, and we call ourselves the Women of Worth within Grace Online, the women's program is called the Women of Worth. Our community is really about supporting women through that process and saying, listen, you're not alone. You have people who can walk this road with you, people who can very closely empathize with what you've experienced. You know, me as a facilitator, for example, I know what it's like to live in a marriage like the one that was described this morning. I've been there. Our other facilitators have lived in abusive marriages and have experienced some of the trauma that the ladies are talking about. So, turning our pain into purpose is really what we're about. We're not a place where we gather together to have a pity party and sort of just sit down and all look at each other and go, well, what are we going to do? This is just so awful. Obviously, there's a time and a place to acknowledge the trauma that people have been through. And it's very important to feel seen and heard and have people, people acknowledge that this is what's happened to you. But then there's a time to move on and to empower yourself and to work through that stuff. And that is really what we're about. We want to give women the tools to be able to move out of that place of self-pity and self-doubt and hopelessness to a place of hope and courage and empowerment. So that's what we're trying to do. It requires a great level of bravery and commitment, though.
Awesome. Thanks, Bronwyn. Thanks for sharing that and explaining that a bit deeper. Lastly, just for a few minutes, maybe you can share with us what it is that you have seen in the Ladies Sexual Addiction Recovery Program, but most specifically, I think the teenage girls sexual addiction recovery space. And then maybe she hasn't been fully sexually addicted, but I mean, we're working with those first exposures and stuff. But anyway, what is it that you could share with the viewers about the specific, that specific focus, the Ladies Sexual Addiction Program, and then lastly, the teenage ladies, girls program?
Oh, gosh, I think possibly the first thing to say there, Kenneth, is that if we think that pornography addiction is a men's problem or a boy's problem, we are so wrong. I think that's the most important thing to say. If we think that pornography and sexual addiction is something that only affects men, we are living in a parallel universe. We have so many women and girls who struggle with addiction to pornography and sexual addiction as much as men do. But what has come up time and time again in our addiction recovery groups is the added share of shame that comes along with being a woman or a girl who has a sexual addiction, because of the fact that society almost expects, perhaps I can use that word, I don't think it's too far off, expects that boys and men will be indulging in pornography. It's almost a given, and I've certainly taught for long enough to have had many discussions with teenage boys who will say to me, you know what, pornography is normal. We all watch porn. And if you don't watch porn, something's wrong with you. I've had those conversations with teenage boys that if you don't watch porn, like something, are you like asexual or something? It's almost been accepted as a healthy outplaying of your sexual awakening as a boy. And I know for men, access to pornography, now you have just got a broader access. But, when I was growing up, pornography magazines in the home were not too weird. It was quite normal that your dad or your older brothers had pornography in the house. But I suppose having worked at an all-boys boarding school, I would say by the time, if you haven't seen pornography as a young person, by the time you come into high school, you will be exposed to it. Now, the young ladies that I've worked with, particularly, I have a girl at the moment who she started with pornography when she was 9, and that might seem like a mind-blowing concept to people, but I know, Kenneth, you would know from the men's side, the men's recovery program, round about 8 or 9 to be exposed to pornography is pretty normal these days. That is actually where, for a lot of people, the addiction begins. And obviously, what I've seen in my work with the young people is the younger you are when you're exposed to pornography, the more likely it is to take hold of you and begin you down that addiction road.
Absolutely.
Because obviously, and I don't want to go too much into the psychology of it, you did say 2 minutes, but I can talk and talk and talk. I'm a teacher. So, that your brain is so malleable when you are young. Your brain is so malleable, and obviously exposure to something as extreme as pornography can very quickly take hold of your brain, and it forms what we call neural pathways that make you inclined to keep coming back to pornography and keep coming back. And so to break that habit in somebody who is only 13 years old and has been watching pornography for 4 years really takes some time. The good news, again, is that with young people, if they get into addiction recovery when they're still young, your brain is still malleable enough for that addiction to be broken with the right tools. And so, yeah, it's quite an interesting field to be in, and boys and girls are addicted to pornography. And obviously, it just puts them in such a vulnerable space because pornography addiction leads into other sexual addictions. And the world, with regards to healthy sexuality, is a very confusing thing for a teenager anyway. And so acting out sexually, becoming promiscuous at a young age, those kind of things obviously can very easily become part and parcel of a pornography addiction because it just is almost like a natural progression to what they are seeing and what they're exposing themselves to on a regular basis.
Yeah, amazing, awesome. And anything that you can share, what is it that you've seen happen in specifically this younger lady that you're working with, or one of the younger ladies that you're working with, in their lives whilst they were on the program? What progress have you seen, or what changes have you seen, or what difficulties have you noticed in that process? And then we'll conclude with that. Yeah.
Yeah, gosh, I think the most important thing is to help the child, because they are children, to realize that they've been using pornography as a crutch, that it's become a coping mechanism for them emotionally. So, like I said, and I don't mean it facetiously, I mean it quite seriously, being a teenager is a very tumultuous time. I have a teenager of my own. They experience their emotions kind of to the extreme. And so having an emotional crutch, having an escape route where you can completely disengage from the world is a helpful thing for them, So for them to realize that pornography has become an emotional crutch, it's become a way to escape the overwhelm that you feel, the stress, the anxiety, just a general way to turn your brain off, turn your emotions off, turn your world off for a moment and go into this fantasy world. It's understandable how quickly that can become a crutch that you lean on. And so I think the biggest thing that we do with young people is helping them to realize how much they're depending on it for emotional wellness. And people can use anything. It can be pornography, drugs, alcohol, sleeping, sex, gambling, whatever it might manifest as, even addiction to electronics. We're seeing kids who cannot survive without being on their phones. That is an example of escapism, emotional escapism. And so what we try and do with the teens is
Mm, mm. Oh, Bronwyn, I've lost your sound. Can you hear me? Yeah, I think we've got some lag on the line. Are you back now? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now, Ken? Yeah, I
Yes,
can hear you.
it's
Can you
back
hear
now.
me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No,
I'll conclude with that, with basically saying we need to teach them how to emotionally regulate in a healthy way, to throw their
mm,
crutch away and to
mm,
deal with life and its problems head on, because
mm.
you're not ever going to live a life that doesn't have anxiety and stress and emotional overwhelm. We've got to learn how to
Yeah,
deal with those emotions and unpack them in a healthy way.
yeah. Excellent. Awesome. So if there's anybody out there that
Thank
needs
you.
help, you're welcome to connect with me, reach out to me. It may be that Bronwyn will be involved with your situation. She's often the first person that contacts new people reaching out to us. Bronwyn, thanks so much for taking the time and sharing with us some of the insights and stuff that you've seen and experienced yourself as well, and participating in this process. So we're really blessed to have everybody, just an amazing team on this, in this process, in this transformational journey known as Grace Online. So thanks everyone. Thanks for listening to us. And I hope you all have a nice day going forward. If there's any questions, anything you missed, anything you want to ask, please just type in the comments below and we will answer as soon as possible. Thanks everyone. Thanks Bronwyn. Have a nice day, guys.
Cheers. Bye bye. Thanks.